At Thanksgiving, my grandson looked at me and said, "You're just here to fill the empty seat." So I sat still and made sure mine was the only one that mattered by morning. Those words from Parker's mouth hit me like a physical blow. His eyes, so much like William's, held none of the warmth I remembered from when he was small. At 70, I thought I'd grown a thick skin, but some wounds cut deeper than others, especially when inflicted by someone you love. I clutched my handbag tighter in my lap and forced my face to remain neutral. The Thanksgiving table in William and Katherine's dining room stretched before me, laden with dishes I'd spent days preparing. My signature sweet potato casserole, homemade cranberry sauce, and the pumpkin pie that William had loved since childhood. I'd driven nearly 2 hours to be here, carefully balancing those dishes on my passenger seat. Yet there I sat, at the far end of the table, almost as an afterthought, while Katherine's family occupied the prime positions near William, my place. Setting didn't even match the others. They had Katherine's grandmother's china, while mine was clearly from their everyday set. "Parker," Katherine said with a half-hearted tone of reproach, though I caught the slight curl of her lip that suggested amusement rather than disapproval. William cleared his throat but said nothing in my defense. He was busy carving the turkey, a task my late husband James had always performed at our family gatherings. "What?" Parker shrugged, turning his attention to his phone. "That's what Mom said yesterday." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I took a small sip of water, my throat suddenly dry. "Well," Katherine's mother broke the silence with an overly bright voice, "these mashed potatoes are divine, Katherine. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. You must give me the recipe." "It's nothing special," Katherine replied. "Just added a bit of cream cheese this year." The conversation moved on, flowing around me like I was a rock in a stream. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Decades of practiced politeness kept me seated, kept the smile frozen on my face, kept me nodding at appropriate intervals. Through the dinner, I caught fragments of conversations that weren't meant for my ears. William and his father-in-law discussing some investment opportunity. Katherine's sister mentioning that Uncle David's last-minute cancellation worked out for the best. Confirming what I'd already suspected. I was the replacement guest, invited only because someone else couldn't make it. I'd driven 2 hours, cooked for days for this, to fill an empty seat. As dessert was being served, William leaned toward Katherine, whispering something that made her nod and glance in my direction. I pretended not to notice, but my heart sank further. I'd seen that look before, the calculating, one that preceded requests for loans that were never repaid. Later, as Katherine's family gathered in the living room, I offered to help with dishes, an old habit and a welcome escape from the forced conversation. "You don't have to, Judith," Katherine said, though she made no move to stop me as I collected plates. In the kitchen, with water running and dishes clattering, I found a moment's peace, until I heard the hushed voices just outside the door. "We need to talk to her tonight," William was saying. "The business loan application is due next week, and we need a co-signer." "Do you think she'll agree?" Katherine asked. She was hesitant about the last one. "She will," William's voice hardened. "I've been setting the groundwork, mentioning how difficult things have been. Besides, what else is she doing with that money? She lives in that same tiny apartment, drives that old car. It's just sitting there. What if she says no? She won't. Mom's never said no to me. Not really." There was a dismissive confidence in his tone that made my hands still in the soapy water. "If she hesitates, I'll remind her how we're her only family, how Parker needs to see his grandmother being supportive." I felt something break inside me, not with a crash, but with a quiet snap. The kind that comes after years of bending to near breaking. Decades of putting William first, of being there whenever he called, of emptying my savings to help with his down payment, of babysitting at a moment's notice so they could take luxury vacations I could never afford. I looked down at my wrinkled hands in the dishwater. Hands that had held William through countless fevers and heartbreaks. Hands that had worked 2 jobs after James died to ensure William could stay in the same school, wear the same brands as his friends, attend the college of his choice. And now, those hands were good for washing dishes and signing loan papers. I dried my hands slowly on a kitchen towel, my mind suddenly clear. I walked back to the dining room to collect my purse, my movements deliberate. "Leaving already, Judith?" "Katherine's?" Mother asked with feigned disappointment. "Yes, I have a bit of a drive ahead of me," I said. William appeared in the doorway, eyes narrowing slightly. "Mom, before you go, Katherine and I wanted to talk to you about something important." "Actually, William?" I said with a calm I didn't. "No, I possessed. I'm quite tired. Perhaps another time. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. It won't take long. It's about a business opportunity. I finished for him. Yes, I assume so. But it will have to wait. He looked taken aback by my interruption, so uncharacteristic of my usual acquiescence. I'll walk you out, he finally said, clearly planning to make his pitch in private. At the door, away from the others, he placed a hand on my shoulder. Mom, we're in a bit of a tight spot with the new business venture. The bank needs a co-signer with more established credit. I looked at my son, this man I'd given everything for. And for the first time, I saw him clearly, not through the lens of maternal love that excuses all flaws, but as he truly was. I'll think about it, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. For decades, my answer had always been an immediate yes. His hand tightened slightly on my shoulder. We need to move quickly on this. It's a time-sensitive opportunity. Nevertheless, I'll think about it, I repeated, more firmly this time. As I drove home in the darkness, Parker's words echoed in my head. You're just here to fill the empty seat. Maybe I had been, not just at Thanksgiving, but for years. A convenient resource, a backup plan, an ATM with no withdrawal limits. But as I pulled into my apartment complex, I made a silent promise to myself. By next Thanksgiving, things would be different. I would no longer be an empty seat waiting to be filled with others' expectations and demands. I would become the seat that mattered. Chapter 2. A Life of Sacrifices. That night, I couldn't sleep. Parker's words kept echoing in my mind, intertwining with William's thinly veiled demands for money. I got up around 3 a.m. and made myself a cup of tea, sitting by my small apartment window, watching the occasional car pass by on the quiet street below. In the stillness of night, memories flooded back, not as a gentle wave, but as a torrent that couldn't be contained any longer. I remembered the day James died, 28 years ago. William was just 12. The sudden heart attack took everything from us. My partner, my love, our financial security. The life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses. I was left with a half-paid mortgage, a traumatized child, and a teaching assistant salary that couldn't possibly stretch to cover our needs. So I took a second job cleaning office buildings at night. For 6 years, I worked 18-hour days. William never saw me clean. I made sure of that. I'd come home at midnight, shower away the smell of disinfectant, and be up by 6 to make his breakfast before school. I sold our house, the one James and I had lovingly renovated, and moved us to a small apartment so William could stay in the same school district with his same friends. I wore the same clothes for years so he could have the designer jeans his peers wore. I ate discount grocery items past their best buy dates so he could have fresh food. When college came, I liquidated what little retirement savings I had accumulated. It's an investment in your future, I told William, believing it with all my heart. I was so proud when he graduated with his business degree, the first in our family to finish college. I never remarried, though there were opportunities. One man in particular, Robert, a kind widower who taught at the same school, had pursued me gently for years. But William had been resistant to the idea of a replacement for his father, and I couldn't bear to upset him. Robert eventually married someone else, and sometimes I would see them at the grocery store, their easy companionship a stark reminder of what I had sacrificed. I sipped my cooling tea, watching dawn slowly break over the horizon. The sacrifices hadn't stopped when William became an adult. 5 years ago, he and Katherine had found their dream home, a house far beyond what they could reasonably afford on their salaries. William called me, excited but anxious. Mom, we're $30,000 short for the down payment. The sellers won't budge, and if we don't close next week, we'll lose it. I had just retired, my modest savings intended to supplement my small pension. But William sounded so desperate, and Katherine was pregnant with Parker at the time. Of course I'll help, I had said without hesitation, transferring nearly half my savings to them the next day. We'll pay you back as soon as we're settled, William had promised. That promise, like so many others, remained unfulfilled. Then there were the business ventures, a series of can't-miss opportunities that somehow always missed. A food truck that failed after 6 months. An online retail store that never gained traction. A partnership and a friend's startup that dissolved amid bitter accusations. Each time, William came to me with urgent requests, compelling stories about being on the verge of success if only he had a little more capital. And each time, I gave what I could, draining my resources further, believing that this time would be different. This time, William would find his footing. This time, the investment would pay off. This time, I'd see some return. I set my empty teacup in the sink and pulled out a small wooden box from my bedroom closet. Inside were mementos I rarely looked at now. Photographs, letters, cards from William over the years. I sifted through birthday cards with childish handwriting to the best mom ever. I love you to the moon and back. Thank you for everything you do for me. When had those genuine expressions of love transformed into calculated affection, doled out strategically when he needed something? When had I become merely a resource to be tapped rather than a person to be cherished? At the bottom of the box was a letter James had written to me shortly before he died. He'd had a premonition, perhaps, leaving it with his will. I'd read it so many times the paper was soft and creased along the fold lines. My fingers traced his handwriting as I read, the words that now held new meaning. My dearest Judith, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry to have left you alone. I know how you love, completely and without reservation. It's what made me fall for you that first day. But promise me this, don't lose yourself in loving others. Even William, especially William. He has always been the center of your world. And that's as it should be for now. But someday, he'll have his own life. And when that day comes, please remember to live for yourself too. You deserve joy of your own. A life that's rich and full, not just as William's mother, but as Judith, the extraordinary woman I was privileged to love. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the box. In all these years, I had failed to keep that promise to James. I had allowed myself to become nothing more than William's mother, my identity and worth measured only by what I could provide to him. The morning light was fully streaming through my window now. I showered and dressed, then made a simple breakfast. As I ate, my phone chimed with a text from William. Hope you got home safely last night. Let's talk soon about that business opportunity. Time sensitive. Love you. No inquiry about how I was feeling. No genuine concern for my well-being. Just a reminder of what he wanted from me. For the first time in decades, I didn't immediately respond. Instead, I put down my phone and picked up a notepad, beginning to make a list. First item, appointment with my bank. Second, consultation with a lawyer. It was time to keep my promise to James. It was time to live for myself, too. The following Monday, I walked into Riverdale Community Bank with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Marion Taylor, a financial advisor I'd known casually through church events, greeted me with surprise. Judith, what brings you in today? Everything all right with your accounts? I need to make some changes, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Significant ones. An hour later, I left with a completely restructured financial profile. My savings were now in a protected account that required in-person verification for large withdrawals. I had canceled and replaced my debit card, set up new online banking credentials, and arranged for electronic statements instead of paper mail that William occasionally helped me sort when he visited. This is a good start, Marion had said, patting my hand. But if you're truly concerned about financial pressure from family, you might want to consult with an attorney as well. I had nodded, already planning my next stop. 2 days later, I sat across from Linda Chen, an elder law attorney, recommended by Marion. Her office was small but neat, with credentials displayed on the wall behind her desk. Unfortunately, Mrs. Harmon, what you're describing is something I see often, she said after I explained my situation. Financial exploitation of elderly parents doesn't always look like someone stealing your checkbook. It can be much more subtle. Emotional manipulation, guilt trips, implied threats of withholding grandchildren. I'm not sure I'd call it exploitation, I said, still uncomfortable with such a harsh characterization of William's behavior. Linda smiled gently. Many parents feel that way. But consider this. If a stranger were treating you this way, would you hesitate to call it exploitation? The question lingered with me as she helped draft a durable power of attorney, naming my cousin Ellen as my financial agent should I become incapacitated, rather than William. We also updated my will and created a healthcare directive. This is just protection, Linda assured me. You're not disinheriting anyone or doing anything drastic. You're simply ensuring your wishes are respected and your needs are prioritized. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from William. Mom, tried calling twice. Need to discuss that business opportunity ASAP. Can I stop by tonight? My heart raced at the thought of confronting him so soon. I wasn't ready. I typed, back. Not feeling well today. Perhaps next week. His response was immediate. "It's really time-sensitive, Mom. I can bring soup if you're sick." The old Judith would have relented, put his needs first, despite her own discomfort. But not today. "No. Thank you. Doctor advised rest. We'll call when I'm better." I turned off my phone before he could respond. Over the next 2 weeks, I strategically avoided William's increasingly frequent calls and texts about the urgent business opportunity. When I finally answered, I kept conversations brief, citing a persistent cold and doctor's appointments. Meanwhile, I began making other changes. I enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the senior center, something I'd always wanted to try. I reconnected with old colleagues from my teaching days, meeting for coffee and genuinely enjoying conversations that didn't revolve around family obligations or financial needs. I also joined a support group recommended by Linda, Family Boundaries. In later life, initially, I felt like an imposter sitting in that circle of mostly women in their 60s and 70s. Surely their situations were worse than mine. But as they shared their stories, adult children borrowing retirement funds, moving in temporarily for years, demanding ongoing childcare despite health issues, I recognized patterns that mirrored my own experiences. Elaine, a soft-spoken woman in her 70s, approached me after my third meeting. "You're still in the guilt phase," she said with understanding. "We all go through it. But remember this, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary." By the 4th week of my strategic retreat, William's approach changed. Unable to pin me down about the business loan, he began showing up unannounced at my apartment, often with Parker in tow. "We were just in the neighborhood," he'd say casually, though they lived across town. "Thought we'd check on you since you've been so sick." The first time I was caught off guard, still in my painting clothes with watercolor smudges on my hands. "You're painting?" William asked, his tone suggesting he'd caught me doing something illicit rather than pursuing a harmless hobby. "Just a beginner's class," I said, stepping aside to let them in, hating how I instantly felt the need to minimize my enjoyment. He replied, looking around my apartment as if searching for other signs of independence. "Well, anyway, since we're here, I thought we could quickly discuss that business proposal. Parker can watch TV while we talk." I glanced at Parker, slumped on my couch, already absorbed in his phone. The boy hadn't even greeted me properly. "Not today, William," I said firmly. "I have plans this afternoon." "Plans?" He raised an eyebrow. "What plans?" "I'm meeting friends for coffee," I said, surprising myself with how easily the truth came out. "Friends?" He made it sound like I was too old for such concepts. "Which friends?" "Former colleagues," I replied, growing irritated with the interrogation. "From school." "Can't you reschedule?" "This is important, Mom. My future, our family's future, depends on this business opportunity." The familiar guilt rose in my chest, but I thought of Elaine's words and stood my ground. "I'm sorry, but no. We can talk another time when we've planned it in advance." William's face hardened in a way I recognized from his childhood, the look that preceded a tantrum when he didn't get his way. But he was no longer a child, and I was no longer obligated to appease his every demand. "Fine," he said coldly. "Parker, let's go." As they left, I heard William mutter to Parker, "Grandma's been acting strange lately, almost like she doesn't care about us anymore." The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Almost. The next time they showed up unannounced, I wasn't home. I was at a museum exhibition with my painting class. William left an irritated voicemail about wasting our time coming to see me. The third time, I answered the door but didn't invite them in, explaining I was on my way out to a doctor's appointment, a true statement, though it was just a routine checkup. William's frustration was palpable. "Mom, what's going on with you? You're never available anymore. Don't you care about helping your family?" The accusation stung, but I held firm. "I do care, William, but I also have my own life and responsibilities," he scoffed. "What responsibilities? You're retired." Those words, so dismissive of my worth beyond what I could provide for him, strengthened my resolve. I was making the right decision. That evening, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. "Judith? This is Lauren Williams, William's ex-wife." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't spoken to Lauren since the divorce 5 years ago, a bitter split that William had blamed entirely on her unreasonable expectations and materialistic demands. "I hope you don't mind me calling," she continued, her voice hesitant. "But there's something important you should know about William. Something that might protect you from making the same mistakes I did. I've been debating whether to call you for weeks," Lauren continued, But when Parker mentioned his dad was pressuring you for another loan, I knew I had to warn you. Warn me about what? I asked, gripping my armrest. The reason our marriage ended wasn't what William told you. It wasn't about my unreasonable expectations. She paused. William has a gambling problem, not casual betting, serious addiction-level gambling. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips disguised as business meetings. My mind raced back to his failed ventures, urgent needs for cash, vague explanations. He ran up $40,000 in credit card debt without my knowledge, Lauren continued. He took out a second mortgage, forged my signature. When I confronted him, he promised to get help. Even went to Gamblers Anonymous. Did it help? For 3 months. Then Katherine came into the picture, his assistant at the time. Suddenly, he had new resources. When I filed for divorce, he emptied our joint accounts. My hands trembled. Does Katherine know? She must by now. But William is persuasive. He makes failures sound like temporary setbacks caused by others. He's always convinced the next opportunity will fix everything. Lauren shared details of financial deceptions, impulsive spending, poorly planned business ventures, loans from friends never repaid. Why tell me this now? I finally asked. I still care what happens to you. You were kind when we were family, and Parker needs at least one stable, financially secure grandparent. If William drains you dry, who will be there? When Parker really needs help? After hanging up, I sat stunned. The pieces fit. William's constant need for money, failed enterprises, increasingly urgent demands. But gambling? It seemed so unlike my responsible, business-minded son, or was it? Had I been seeing William clearly, or just the version I wanted to see? I made another appointment with my financial advisor. I need to know exactly what my financial picture looks like, I told Marion, and ensure no one can access my accounts but me. 2 days later, Parker texted, "Can I come over tomorrow? Just me." I replied, "Of course. I'll make chocolate chip tea. Cookies." When Parker arrived, he seemed different, less sullen, more nervous. He actually put his phone away, accepting cookies with a quiet thanks. "Everything okay at home?" I asked. He shrugged. "Dad's stressed, fighting with Mom a lot." "About what?" "Money, mostly. And me, sometimes." He looked up. "Did you know Dad took money from my college fund?" My heart sank. "No. Mom found out last week. She was screaming. Dad said it was temporary, that he'd replace it with interest when this business deal comes through." His voice was flat, as if he'd heard such promises before. "And the business deal requires a co-signer," I said softly. Parker nodded. "That's why he's been trying to talk to you." He hesitated. "Mom said not to tell you about the college fund." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you for trusting me." "I'm sorry about what I said at Thanksgiving, about you filling an empty seat." His eyes dropped. "Dad told me to say it." The revelation hit me like a blow. "Your father told you to say that?" Parker nodded miserably. "He said if you felt bad, you'd try harder to be part of the family, that you'd help us more." "He said you have money sitting around while we're struggling," Parker continued. "That it's not fair." I took a deep breath. "Parker, I don't have money sitting around. I have retirement savings I need to live on. I've helped your father many times, but I can't keep doing it at the expense of my own security." "I get it," he said, surprising me. "Mom says the same about her savings, that Dad keeps wanting to invest it in stuff that never works out." We talked for nearly 2 hours. Parker was more aware of family dynamics than I'd realized, observant enough to see patterns in his father's behavior, though too young to fully understand. As he left, Parker paused. "I liked hanging out today, just us." "I did too," I said. "You're welcome anytime. Maybe we could do something sometime, like see a movie? I'd like that very much." Later, as I prepared for bed, my doorbell rang. It was 9:30 p.m., too late for casual visitors. Through the peephole, I saw William, posture rigid, expression thunderous. Behind him stood Katherine, arms crossed tightly. I opened the door, but blocked the entrance. "William, Katherine, it's quite late. We need to talk," William said, barely controlling his anger. "Now." "What about?" "You know exactly what," Katherine snapped. "Parker came home with interesting stories about your conversation." William stepped forward, forcing me to retreat. They entered uninvited. "You had no right," William said, closing the door. No right to discuss our finances with our son. I didn't raise the subject, I said calmly. Parker did. You should have. Shut it down. Katherine's voice rose. Instead, you filled his head with your version. William moved closer, using his height to intimidate me, a tactic he'd never employed before. Mom, I don't know what game you're playing, but it stops now. Family supports each other. Family doesn't hide behind attorneys and bank policies. Chill ran through me. How do you know about my attorney? Linda Chen is a family friend, William said, a cold smile spreading across his face. She called to congratulate me on our new business venture, the one you've been too busy to discuss. Imagine her surprise when I had no idea what she was talking about. My mind raced. Linda hadn't mentioned knowing William, but in a community this size, such connections weren't unusual. Katherine stepped forward. You went behind our backs to lawyer up against your own family. I didn't lawyer up against anyone, I said, keeping my voice steady. I simply updated my legal documents, something every senior should do regularly. Changing your power of attorney from your son to a distant cousin? William's voice rose. Creating a trust that restricts access to your assets? That's not routine planning, Mom. That's a deliberate attempt to shut out your family. I took a deep breath. I made decisions to protect my financial security, something I should have done years ago. Protect it from whom? From me? William's face flushed. After everything I've done for you, the absurdity of his statement might have made me laugh if the situation weren't so serious. William, I think you've confused who has done what for whom. So that's it? You're just cutting us off? Katherine interjected. What about Parker? Don't you care about his future? I care deeply about Parker's future, I said, which is why I won't enable behaviors that harm him. William stepped closer, his face inches from mine. What exactly are you implying? I met his gaze. I know about the gambling, William. I know about the money you took from Parker's college fund. His eyes widened momentarily before narrowing. Lauren, he spat. She always was a vindictive liar. And Parker? Is he a liar too? William stepped back, running a hand through his hair. You don't understand. These are temporary setbacks. This new business venture is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed, I interrupted. Especially not with your track record. Katherine gasped. How dare you? William has built successful businesses from nothing. Name one, I challenged. One business that's lasted more than a year. One investment that's returned even what was put into it. Silence hung heavy in the air. William's face hardened. Mom, I'm going to make this very simple. Either you support your family by co-signing this loan, or you can forget about being part of our lives. There it was. The ultimatum I'd been expecting since Thanksgiving. Still, hearing it spoken aloud sent a wave of sadness through me. That's your choice? I asked quietly. Financial support or no relationship at all? It's not like that, Katherine said quickly. We just need help during this transitional period. Family helps family. I have helped, I said. For decades. I've given William money I couldn't afford to lose. I've co-signed loans that I ended up repaying. I've depleted my savings to support his ventures. So now that we really need you, you're done? William's voice was sharp with disbelief. Some mother you are. The words stung, but I stood my ground. I'm the same mother who worked 2 jobs to raise you alone, who went without so you could have every opportunity, who has supported you financially well into your adulthood. And now you're holding that over my head, William said bitterly. No. I'm simply saying there are limits to what I can give, financially and emotionally. I will not co-sign another loan. I will not drain my retirement to fund another failed business. I will not be manipulated with threats of cutting me off from my grandson. William's expression turned cold. Then we have nothing more to discuss. He grabbed Katherine's arm. Let's go. As they headed for the door, I spoke again. I love you, William. That hasn't changed. When you're ready to have a relationship that isn't based on what I can give you financially, I'll be here. He paused. Hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Don't call us. Don't try to contact Parker. You've made your choice. The door slammed behind them. The sound echoing in my suddenly empty apartment. I sank onto my couch, shaking. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood firm against William's demands. I had chosen my own well-being over his wants. It felt both terrifying and strangely liberating. The following week passed in a blur of emotions. Grief, doubt, resolve, and moments of surprising peace. I continued my painting classes, finding solace in the gentle encouragement of my instructor and classmates. "You seem distracted today, Judith," Elaine commented during our support group meeting. I shared the confrontation with William and Katherine, the ultimatum, my refusal. "I might have lost my grandson," I concluded, my voice breaking. "I'm not sure I did the right thing." A chorus of supportive voices surrounded me. "You absolutely did the right thing," Elaine said firmly. "William needs to face the consequences of his actions instead of constantly being bailed out." "But Parker is 15, not 5, another woman interjected. "He has a phone. He knows where you live. If he wants to maintain a relationship with you, he will." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text as I was driving home. At a stoplight, I glanced down to see a message from Parker. "Can I come over tomorrow after school? Don't tell Dad." My heart raced as I typed back, "Of course." The next day, Parker arrived looking nervous but determined. "I'm not supposed to be here," he said immediately. "Dad said we're not allowed to see you anymore." "I know," I replied gently. "I'm glad you came anyway." We sat at my kitchen table, cookies between us once again. "Dad's been on a rampage all week," Parker said, breaking a cookie without eating it. "Mom's threatening to leave if he doesn't get help. He lost a bunch of money again." I listened quietly as Parker described the deteriorating situation at home. Katherine had finally confronted William about his gambling after discovering new credit card debt. William had stormed out, disappeared, for 2 days, then returned claiming he'd figured everything out with yet another business scheme. "Mom called his bluff this time," Parker said. "Said she'd only stay if he got real help. She even called Grandpa, her dad, to come stay with us for a while." "That sounds like a positive step," I said carefully. Parker nodded. "Grandpa's pretty intense. He made Dad hand over all his credit cards. Said he'd only help financially if Dad went to rehab." "Is William considering that?" "He doesn't have much choice. Mom's serious this time." Parker looked up at me, his expression more adult than I'd ever seen it. "I told them what you said about your retirement money, about how you can't keep bailing Dad out." My breath caught. How did they respond? Mom got really quiet. Then she said she'd been telling Dad the same thing. Parker hesitated. "I think she's actually on your side, even if she won't admit it." As Parker was leaving, he hugged me suddenly, the first real hug he'd given me in years. "I'm not going to stop coming just because Dad's mad," he said firmly. "You're my grandmother. That matters." Tears pricked my eyes as I hugged him back. "Thank you, Parker." After he left, I felt a sense of cautious hope. William's problems were far from solved, but perhaps this crisis would finally force him to seek the help he needed. And regardless of what happened with my son, I hadn't lost my grandson. That evening, I received an unexpected text from Katherine. "We need to talk. Just us. Tomorrow." I stared at my phone, heart pounding. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I would no longer be just an empty seat at someone else's table. I had reclaimed my place in my own life, and no one could take that away from me again. Katherine arrived at my apartment looking different than I'd ever seen her. No designer outfit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her usual polished facade had cracked, revealing something more human underneath. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I led her to the living room, offering tea which she accepted with a grateful nod. "William doesn't know I'm here," she began, cradling the mug. "He's at his first intensive therapy session. His father is watching Parker." I nodded, waiting. Katherine took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, Judith. A significant one." She met my eyes directly. "I've enabled William's behavior for years. I've participated in the manipulation. I've allowed him to pressure you financially." Her frankness surprised me. "What changed? When Parker told us what you said about your retirement funds?" She paused. It was like hearing my own thoughts spoken aloud. "I've been telling William the same thing privately for years, but never had the courage to stand firm. Watching you finally set boundaries made me realize I needed to do the same." She explained that after our confrontation, William had spiraled further, gambling away, money set aside for their property taxes. It was the final straw. My father flew in immediately when I called. He's been dealing with addiction in his role as a hospital administrator for decades. He recognized what I've been denying, that William needs professional help, not another bailout. "How is William handling it?" I asked. "Not well," she admitted. There was a lot of anger, blame, denial, but when faced with losing everything, me, Parker, the house. He finally agreed to treatment. She set her mug down, hands trembling. Slightly. William has a long road ahead. Recovery isn't linear, and there's significant financial damage to address. And where do I fit into all this? I asked cautiously. Katherine looked up. That's entirely up to you. You have every right to maintain your distance after how we've treated you. But I wanted you to know that I respect what you did. Standing, your ground didn't cause William's problems. It may have been the catalyst he needed to finally face them. We talked for almost an hour. I learned more about the extent of William's gambling, worse than I'd imagined, and the financial situation they now faced. Katherine's parents had offered to help with some immediate debts on the condition that William complete treatment and agree to financial oversight. Parker misses you, she said, as she prepared to leave. He came home yesterday much happier after seeing you. I thought you might be upset about that. She shook her head. I was at first, but then I realized how fortunate Parker is to have a grandmother who prioritizes his long-term well-being over being the fun grandparent who just gives him things. At the door, Katherine hesitated. William may not be ready to reconcile for some time. His therapist says he needs to take full responsibility for his actions before making amends. I understand, I said. I'll be here if he's ready. And in the meantime? She asked. Parker? I'd like to maintain my relationship with Parker, if you're comfortable with that. She nodded. More than comfortable. I think he needs you now more than ever. Over the following months, a new normal emerged. Parker visited regularly, sometimes bringing homework, sometimes just wanting to talk. We developed rituals, Sunday morning pancakes, occasional movies, a shared interest in photography that surprised us both. Katherine kept me updated on William's progress, the successes and setbacks of recovery, his work with a financial counselor, his small steps toward rebuilding trust with his family. William and I remained estranged, though I sent a card when he reached his 3-month sobriety milestone. He didn't respond, but Katherine said he'd kept it on his nightstand. As Thanksgiving approached again, a full year since Parker's cutting comment, I found myself reflecting on the journey. I'd lost the illusion of a perfect relationship with my son, but gained something perhaps more valuable. Authentic connections with my grandson and daughter-in-law, and most importantly, a renewed relationship with myself. I decided to host a small Thanksgiving dinner in my apartment, inviting friends from my painting class, neighbors who had become dear to me, and Elaine from my support group. Katherine and I had discussed whether to include Parker, ultimately deciding he should choose where to spend the holiday without pressure. The morning of Thanksgiving, I was arranging flowers for my table when the doorbell rang. Parker stood there, grinning, a bakery box in his hands. Pumpkin pie, he announced. Mom said I couldn't come empty-handed. My heart swelled as I hugged him. I'm so glad you came. Just for a few hours, he clarified. We're having dinner at Grandpa and Grandma Miller's. He paused, then added, Dad's there too. I nodded, understanding the significance. William was slowly being reintegrated into family events as his recovery progressed. As Parker helped me set the table, placing name cards by each setting, he paused at my place at the head of the table. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small package from his pocket. I made it in woodshop class. Inside was a wooden plaque, small enough to sit by my place setting, carved with the words, "The seat that matters." I looked up, tears blurring my vision. I wanted you to know, Parker said quietly, that I get it now. What you did last year, it wasn't about the money, it was about respect, about being seen as more than just, he hesitated, more than just an empty seat. I finished for him, he nodded. Dad's therapist says healthy relationships have to be about more than what people can do for each other. They have to be about who people are. Such wisdom from someone so young. My guests began arriving shortly after, filling my apartment with warmth and laughter. Parker stayed longer than planned, calling Katherine to ask for an extra hour. He fit seamlessly into this gathering of people who had become my chosen family. As we sat down to eat, I found myself at the head of my own table, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. The wooden plaque sat beside my plate, a reminder of how far we'd all come. When Parker left, he hugged me tightly. Same time next Sunday for pancakes? I'll be here, I promised. That evening, after my guests had departed and I was enjoying the peaceful aftermath of a successful gathering, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from William, the first direct communication in months. Mom, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Parker couldn't stop talking about it. Maybe someday. Anyway, I'm working on step 9. It's the amends step. I have a lot to make up for. Not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know I'm working on it. I sat with the phone in my hand, emotions washing over me. It wasn't an apology yet, but it was a beginning. Whether our relationship could ever be fully repaired remained uncertain, but for the first time, I felt hopeful that whatever came next would be built on something real. I glanced at the wooden plaque Parker had given me, now sitting on my mantle, the seat that matters. A year ago, I'd been just an empty seat at someone else's table. Today, I occupied the seat that truly mattered, the one I'd created for myself, defined by my own worth rather than my usefulness to others. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, my sense of self. And in doing so, I'd opened the door to relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or exploitation. As I prepared for bed, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over yet. But I was no longer just filling an empty seat. I had become the seat that mattered.